You're listening to Top Stories Hub, where raw tales of love, betrayal, and heartbreak burst to life on your screen. If these stories are pulling you in, don't just sit there, hit that like button, it helps the channel more than you might think. Let's dive into today's tale. I'm Sarah Johnson, and I once believed life was clear-cut, divided sharply between right and wrong decisions. You either stay true to your spouse, or you're unfaithful, you're fully committed to love, or you're just coasting. But life has a way of throwing you into a murky haze where good and evil blur into a tangled mess. I never planned for the drama that erupted. I never imagined I'd be the woman to break her wedding vows. And I certainly didn't see it spiraling into a storm of buried secrets, treachery, and cold vengeance. I'm telling this story because the truth needs to come out, not just what I did, but why I was driven to it. I met James when I was 23. Just out of college, we were both tackling our first real jobs. He was quiet, dependable, with a calm presence that drew me in like a warm embrace. Back then, I needed that, no drama, no games, just a man who'd show up and keep his promises. After 2 years of dating, we got married, and for the first 5 years, life felt solid, not perfect, but steady. We settled into a charming home in the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I worked as a copy editor for a local magazine, while James managed operations at a mid-sized shipping company downtown. We had our routines, dinners together, familiar habits. We even adopted a dog, an older golden retriever named Max, who shed everywhere but had the sweetest soul. Life was peaceful, almost tranquil. For a time, I truly thought that was enough. But slowly, that peace turned into an unsettling silence. It started with small changes, James staying out later with no explanation. When I'd ask about his day, he'd mumble, "It's okay," and head upstairs. I assumed work stress was dragging him down. I stayed patient, planning romantic evenings, making his favorite meals, even suggesting couples counseling, but he brushed it all off. The spark we once had dulled, then vanished completely. I'd lie awake at night, wondering if I'd gone wrong somewhere. I wasn't flawless, but I was loyal, caring, and hadn't even considered straying. I wanted desperately to fix our connection, but James had no interest in repairing what was broken. He became a stranger in our own home, and the more I tried to reach him, the further he drifted. Then 2022 arrived, the year that turned everything upside down. I'd just turned 33, and our 10th anniversary passed without a mention, no dinner, no flowers, not even a card. I sat alone on the couch that night, staring at a blank TV while James was held up at work again, questioning how long I could keep pretending we were still a couple. That's when I met Ethan. Ethan was the younger brother of a coworker. He stopped by the office one day to drop off some photography equipment. A freelancer finishing his MFA in visual arts, he had an easygoing charm that felt natural. Our conversation was brief, just a few minutes, but his warmth and lively spirit woke something in me I hadn't felt in years. At first, I shrugged it off as nothing. But Ethan kept showing up, helping with photo shoots for our magazine or pitching in at work events. Everything stayed professional, polite, but I couldn't stop noticing him. More than that, I found myself drawn to him in a way that caught me off guard. I tried to bury those feelings. I kept telling myself I was married, holding on to the person I believed I was. But it's hard to ignore someone who truly listens, laughs at your jokes, and looks at you like you still matter. One evening, after a work event, a sudden downpour trapped Ethan and me under a canopy, with just a thermos of lukewarm coffee and the sound of rain for company. We ended up talking for over an hour, not about work or the storm, but about books we cherished, childhood memories, and dreams we'd let fade. I shared how I'd once dreamed of writing a novel. He confided that his father never supported his art. The conversation was open, honest, and more real than anything I'd had with James in ages. Nothing romantic happened that night. But something changed inside me. I drove home feeling more awake than I had in years. When I saw my reflection, I glimpsed a woman I'd almost forgotten, a woman eager to feel alive again. Ethan and I started texting, at first just light stuff, funny memes, photos from shoots, quick updates. But soon, our chats grew deeper. He'd ask about my day and actually care about the response. He noticed when I changed my hair. He even remembered my favorite coffee order. Meanwhile, James barely looked up from his phone during dinner. I kept it all hidden, not a word to my best friend, my sister, or even my diary, because deep down, I knew I was on shaky ground. Yet it didn't feel like I was betraying James so much as saving myself, like I was reaching for a lifeline in a sea of loneliness. Everything shifted the day I found the receipt. It was tucked in James's jeans pocket while I was doing laundry, a chore he'd always insisted on handling himself. It was a hotel bill from 2 weeks earlier, for a one-night stay at a downtown hotel. My stomach dropped. I checked the date again, and it hit me. I remembered that night clearly. He'd said he was working late, sorting out a delivery issue. I called the hotel, posing as someone confirming a guest's name for a work expense. They verified it was James. I didn't cry or confront him. Instead, a cold clarity settled over me. James was cheating. All those late nights, the distance, the weak excuses, it wasn't work or stress. It was another woman. And he hadn't even bothered to hide it well. For a few days, I acted normal, making breakfast, walking Max, giving him a quick kiss goodbye. But inside, I was crumbling. Yet in that collapse, something else emerged, not sadness or despair, but a sharp, burning anger that demanded justice. I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed hard proof, a solid plan, and full control. So, I turned into a sleuth in my own life. I tracked his schedule, noting every excuse he gave. I found more receipts, one for a lavish dinner, another for jewelry I never received. I even discovered a second phone hidden in his car's glove box, locked, but not safe from someone determined. I photographed every clue, emailed them to myself, and organized them in a digital folder with dates. All the while, I kept texting Ethan. I never shared what I'd found. I didn't want his sympathy, I needed clarity. Through our conversations, I started rediscovering myself, not the wife settling for crumbs of love, but the woman with ambitions, resilience, and a right to more than lies and shadows. That's when I decided, if James could have secrets, I'd have mine too. But unlike him, I'd be careful, leaving no trace. You might think I fell into Ethan's arms then, but I held back from crossing that line, for now. I needed whatever came next to be intentional, not a reckless impulse, because while betrayal stings, justice lasts. So, I built a plan. First, I opened a private bank account in my name. Then, I discreetly met with a lawyer to understand my rights and protect my future. I also hired a private investigator, who confirmed what I'd already uncovered. James had been seeing a woman named Lisa from his office for over a year. They'd even taken a weekend trip to Chicago. She was recently divorced and thought James was about to leave me. Charming. Next, I secured my evidence, backing it up online and storing hard copies in a safe deposit box under my name only. Then I waited, making sure every detail was ready for his reckoning to hit hard. This wasn't just about leaving, it was about ensuring he'd never forget the price of betraying someone loyal. The moment was near. When people think of revenge, they might imagine shouting matches, broken dishes, or someone storming off with a suitcase. But my revenge was quiet, calculated, and exact. I wasn't after drama, I wanted fairness. Once I confirmed James's affair with Lisa, his coworker, I spent weeks perfecting every detail. There was no rush. I needed to be precise, calm, and deliberate. I'd been patient through a decade of marriage. A few more weeks for the perfect outcome was nothing. I had it all documented. Receipts, screenshots from the burner phone, investigator photos, detailed notes, even social media posts that traced their timeline. The evidence was airtight. But I didn't just want to expose him, I wanted him to feel the weight of his betrayal, not just to me but to the life we'd created. On a Tuesday evening, I set things in motion. James was working late again, or so he said. I knew he was at Lisa's. I didn't call or text. I just waited. Around midnight, I slipped into our home office and started packing my things, documents, personal mementos, photos I'd taken off the walls months earlier but couldn't bear to discard. His stuff? I left it alone. This wasn't about tearing him down, it was about removing myself from his world completely. That night, I moved into a short-term rental I'd secured under my maiden name, modern, airy, calm, just me and Max, our faithful golden retriever, who followed me into this new chapter without hesitation. I sat on the floor with him, eating takeout, and felt something I hadn't in years, freedom. The next morning, I sent an envelope to James's office, sealed and labeled only with his name. Inside was every piece of evidence, neatly organized in a folder. At the top, a handwritten note, "Since trust is gone from our marriage, here's the truth you never shared. This is just the beginning, Sarah." Then I walked away. I turned off my phone for 2 days, refusing to hear his excuses, panic, or empty apologies. I wanted him to sit in the silence he'd forced me to endure. When I finally powered my phone back on, it was overwhelmed, over 20 missed calls, a flood of texts, mostly from James, some from mutual friends, and one from Lisa. Apparently, in a desperate attempt to save face or gain sympathy, he'd shown her the envelope. All it did was prove she was just another piece in his game of lies. Her message was short, "I didn't know." "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. James was falling apart. He begged for a meeting, swore it was a one-time mistake, claimed it had only been a few months, lying even when I'd laid out the truth. That's when I knew he wasn't sorry for what he did, only for being caught. I gave him nothing, no reply, no closure. Meanwhile, my lawyer started divorce proceedings. Minnesota's no-fault divorce laws mean blame isn't required, but strong evidence can influence how assets like investments, property, and savings are divided. James had a lot to lose. His company had recently promoted him, putting him in line for a vice president role, a position where a scandal could ruin everything. When I filed, I asked for the house, spousal support, and half our shared assets. Normally, I wouldn't have pushed so hard. My career was stable, and I didn't want to destroy him. But he needed to learn that actions have consequences, that betrayal doesn't come with an easy exit. Of course, he fought back, calling me vindictive, saying I was trying to ruin him. Maybe there was a grain of truth there, but it wasn't about spite, it was about balance. For years, I'd been the one sacrificing, giving up parts of myself, shrinking to fit his life, and now it was his turn to face the fallout of his choices. The divorce stretched over 6 months, a slow unraveling of a life I'd once known. During that time, I began rebuilding my world, piece by piece, with intention. I started seeing a therapist, not because I was broken, but to dig into why I'd stayed so long in a marriage that had already slipped away. I returned to writing, nothing fancy, just short stories, journal pages, and the occasional reflective essay. Each morning, I took Max on leisurely walks through the neighborhood, letting the fresh air clear my mind. I also began volunteering at the local library, helping teens polish their college essays and explore creative writing projects. Then there was Ethan. After James's betrayal came to light, I pulled back from Ethan for a while, not because my feelings for him had dimmed, they hadn't, but because I needed to mend myself without leaning on someone else to keep me steady. To his credit, he respected my space without a hint of resentment. He didn't pressure me or make me feel bad, he simply remained there. Like a warm light patiently waiting for the right time to shine again. About 3 months into the divorce, Ethan and I met for coffee as friends. We sat by a window, sipping lattes, and he asked, "Do you feel free now?" I looked out at the street, people walking, kids laughing, a man with his dog, and said, "For the first time in years, I really do." We didn't leap into romance. We took our time, shared dinners, deep conversations. He'd leave books at my door he thought I'd love, and I'd invite him over for casual movie nights. There was no rush, no heavy expectations, just a gentle, natural bond. He made me feel seen again, not as someone's wife or someone's mistake, but as a multifaceted woman with her own narrative. Then came the bombshell. James's company got wind of his affair. It wasn't my doing, I'd kept my distance, but rumors spread like sparks in a dry field, especially when the other woman works in the same building. The scandal reached HR, and James was demoted from his leadership role, losing his chance at VP and landing on a shaky probationary path. His reputation suffered, his ego even more. After the divorce was finalized, he sent me one last email. "I hope you're happy. You ruined my life." I didn't reply, because he was wrong. I hadn't destroyed his life, he'd done that himself. I'd simply stopped protecting him from the consequences. A week after the divorce was official, I stood in the doorway of our old house, now mine by law, and took one last look at the place where my life had come undone. I had no intention of staying, the memories weighed too much. Before handing the keys to the realtor, I slipped a small note into the kitchen drawer, not for James or Lisa, but for the next person to call that house home. It read, "Pay attention to the quiet, it always speaks the loudest." I walked out, closed the door, and never looked back. That chapter was over. 6 months after the divorce, my life was a world apart from the one I'd left behind. I woke each morning unburdened by bitterness's heavy chains. I went to work without forcing a smile. I stopped checking my phone, fearing what I might find. The silence that once felt suffocating now felt calming, not empty but peaceful. From what I heard, James wasn't doing so well. After losing his promotion, Lisa moved on. Apparently, she wasn't so interested in a man without the title, salary, or clout. She transferred to another department, leaving James to face the mess he'd made, stuck in a low-level role. He left a few voicemails, but I never returned them. Sometimes, the universe has a way of settling scores. At his office, he became a cautionary tale. Colleagues whispered, kept their distance. The man who once carried himself with swagger now seemed diminished, always looking over his shoulder. Meanwhile, I was reconstructing, not just my life but the core of who I was. Ethan became part of my world in the most caring, unhurried way. We weren't rushing toward anything serious, no talk of marriage or big commitments. We were just two people who'd seen the worst in others yet still found the best in each other. He was a listener, not a rescuer, always giving me space to process when I needed it. One night, we sat on the roof of his apartment building, a blanket wrapped around our shoulders. The stars sparkled above, and the city hummed quietly below. I turned to him and said, "I thought I'd be angrier after all this, but I'm not." He smiled and said, "That's because you chose to rise, not to burn it all down." I didn't realize it then, but he was spot on. I hadn't set out to ruin James's life. I'd simply stepped back and let the truth take its course. I didn't grow bitter, I gained clarity. And that difference is everything. I dove back into writing, really committing, crafting essays, articles, even the rough chapters of a memoir. I shared some pieces anonymously online, and to my surprise, people resonated with them. Women reached out, saying my words echoed their own pain, that they felt stuck, that they needed a push to leave, to heal, to rediscover themselves. One message struck me deeply: "Thank you for showing revenge doesn't have to be chaotic. You proved peace can be louder than anything." That's when I understood my story had grown bigger than me. It had become a beacon for every woman who'd been betrayed, silenced, or overlooked. I wasn't just walking away from a failed marriage, I was stepping into a version of myself I'd never fully embraced. And man, what a woman she was becoming. About a year after the divorce, I ran into James at the grocery store. He looked tired, thinner, worn out. The polished charm he used to flaunt was gone. He gave me a nod, and I nodded back, no anger, no words, just a quiet acknowledgement that we'd both changed in ways he never expected. That night, I told Ethan about it. "Was it strange?" he asked. "Not at all," I replied honestly. It felt like closure. And it was, not because James showed remorse or faced consequences, but because I'd grown, not by fighting him, but by choosing myself at last. For years, I'd thought revenge would mean making him share my pain. But the real revenge? It was him seeing me thrive without him, happy, free, and unapologetically whole. That's the ending I never anticipated, and it's the one I'd choose every time.